Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cast Service. My name is Christian Cawley. His name is James McLean. We're here to discuss the news that things have developed concerning the Doctor Who Christmas special that isn't actually going to be taking place and was never taking place. And we know that we've got some other stuff to talk about coming up over the next few weeks. And, you know, various things have got in the way, largely surrounding this kind of topic. So we are going to get to Mind Warp at some point. But I wanted to, to get together with James and just kind of mull this over, because we were under the impression that there was a script and that there was a Doctor Who in production, and that's not the case.
How much do we know about how far they got? Because they say the statement I've got here is the decision to scrap the planned Christmas episode was not taken lightly.
Mm.
That doesn't sound like it was an early decision, but a later decision.
It does.
Not so late. I mean that they've gone into like pre-production or anything, but in terms of like when they announced it,
yeah,
there was plans to do it, but it hasn't transpired, is what I'm getting the impression, because of these things which have led to this thing.
Right. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of statements. There's the official statement from the BBC,
Yeah.
and then there's the thing that Russell T Davies has posted on Instagram, both of which are worth looking at, I think. So first of all, we've got the BBC statement. Okay, we'll go with that one first of all.
Yeah.
They published this on the main BBC website. It's obviously it's been reported more widely than that. So this is stated, headlined, an update on the future of Doctor Who. And it goes on, today we're announcing an update on plans for the future of Doctor Who. As part of securing the next phase of the show for future generations, and in line with the BBC's charter and agreement requirements, the BBC will put Doctor Who out to competitive tender this year. Doctor Who remains an important part of the BBC, and this tender underpins the BBC's continued commitment to Doctor Who, ensuring audiences will enjoy the show for years to come. After careful consideration, the BBC, Russell T Davies and Bad Wolf have collectively decided not to go ahead with the previously announced Doctor Who Christmas episode. This decision was not taken lightly, and we know it will be disappointing for fans, but in order to set the show up for the future series, it was decided that rather than bridge the gap with a one-off special, we are choosing to push forward to invest in the long-term future of the show, which ensures that when the TARDIS lands once more, it does so in all its glory. The previously announced Doctor Who animation series for CBeebies is currently in production. Details of the tender will be announced in due course. The BBC retains all IP in Doctor Who. BBC Studios will continue to lead the global distribution of Doctor Who, as well as licensing consumer products, digital and immersive experiences on behalf of the BBC. So that's that bit. And then there is this kind of other bit, which is courtesy of Russell T Davies' Instagram account. And so goodbye from me to Doctor Who, but hello to a big new future for the show, as the BBC announces it's putting the show out to tender. As a result, there won't be a Christmas special. We only cooked that up to guarantee a future when no one knew what would happen, but now we know there's no need for it. You'll have to wait a bit longer for the new Doctor Who, and you'll be waiting for more Doctor Who than a one-off. So it's worth it. For the record, there was no script. I never wrote it. And no actor was ever approached to play the next Doctor. You may disagree, fine, sit in that chair and wait to be proved right. You'll wait a long time. Now, I'm as excited as anyone to see what comes next. Will they keep the theme tune? Will they lose the blue box? Will they bring back the drive-in? It's all up for grabs, which is so Doctor Who, exciting and unpredictable and new. Here comes the future of Warp Vorp. Pip Madeley shared a screenshot from last year's Doctor Who magazine, or a Doctor Who magazine, in which Russell T Davies says, next December, I'll be here to trumpet and toot about the 2026 Christmas special. It contains these three words: Bafflers, Winternox, and Village. Now, I may be a little bit old-fashioned, but I think when someone gives you the impression that they're producing something, they should actually be producing that thing. Murray Gold has also said that that Russell T Davies is working on a script with multiple endings, depending on how things go. Now, I don't want to bring Murray Gold into this because he's completely separate to all of this, but he's stated to be under the impression that there's a Doctor Who script. Russell T Davies is saying there was no script. We were talking, James and I, about a podcast in which we look at how the BBC kind of considers certain shows to be worth screening and other shows to be limited to radio, even when they are actually filmed. And maybe there's like a veneer of what the BBC wants in terms of professionalism, whatever. This is the opposite of that. I do feel like now really it's very important to be like respectful and give consideration to people who are working on the show. But in some ways, there's a kind of a gloves off moment about this. I think this is utterly, utterly preposterous. It's incredible in its actual meaning, and it is dreadfully unprofessional, in my opinion, James.
I'm just liking this. This anger has a sort of energy of a Harry Enfield character.
I said, Davies, no!
Yeah.
But I am just utterly baffled by it. I've spent a lot of time being baffled by Doctor Who over the past sort of like decade, perhaps. But this is maybe like a biscuit-taking moment. It just doesn't bear any real scrutiny.
I don't know. Yeah. It's one of those situations. It's like, what do you say? Because
yeah,
there's a wall around the details where the line is a revisionism, bit of revisionism going on there, possibly. I imagine there's grains of truth in it as well. I mean, while he may have been planning scripts with multiple outcomes, it's quite likely he never developed a script. There was never a script on the table. So therefore, when he says there was never a script, probably true. So kind of the question is like, how long has this been going on? I don't know. I mean, I was musing about this today. My musing of it just comes back to what we've been saying we've certainly saying the last few podcasts, how the industry is just so, well, no, not that the industry is the wrong word for it. Media, entertainment is such a chaotic beast at the moment. You can look at this as just a nice case study of how chaotic it is, because I don't think you'd ever have this situation at any other time. You'd have decisions to postpone the show, or thinking back to Michael Grade, or make it, or taking a rest, but those come like executive decisions. But this feels to me like a prolonged, awkward conversation between various stakeholders. And nothing has moved forward for various reasons, which we'll probably not know about for many years. And it's ultimately ended as this being the ultimate outcome. And this has led to a very awkward moment where I don't think any institution like the BBC wants to sort of say 6 months before what is being touted as the air date of one of their leading shows, actually we're putting the production of it out to tender, because it doesn't scream of like this is like a planned thing that's been in the works for even a year. It feels like suddenly we've gone into a situation where, and how long has it been since was it last summer, the last Doctor Who one?
Yes, I think so. Yes, just over a year ago. Yeah.
So it's over a year, and it's at this point they realise, or has the decision has been made that it's going to a different company, whether that's Bad Wolf's decision, BBC Mutual, I don't know. That feels a very weird place to be. And then this weird sort of cotton woolly half silence about Doctor Who, where Russell has not ignored it in interviews, not properly engaged with it in interviews, and clearly there's been issues going underneath, which understandably the company's not wanted to talk about. Something's been going on. I don't know, and we won't know. And I wonder if part of it is that sort of sting that no one really knows what to do with this show. Because I mean, traditionally, if BBC was taken off, let's say 1989, it would come back on BBC One, and that would be the choice. Does it come back on BBC One or not? There was never really any decisions like, would it just be a straight to video thing, or would it go to the movies? That was never the case. Yes, we had the co-pro with Canada, which invariably aired on BBC One, but it was BBC One. But now it's like, well, what do you do with this thing? Where does it sit? Where is this market going? No one really knows what people want anymore. We can't really engage a broad demographic in a world where the demographics are no longer broad. So who do we target? I don't know. But yeah, I'd be
Yeah.
fascinated from just an industry point of view. Is like what's gone on behind the scenes. What was Davis and Bad Wolf's concerns or issues? What was the BBC's concerns and issues? What has led to this decision? Because it doesn't feel like a year ago that's where Bad Wolf wanted to be. If they were happy for the BBC to say, and they were happy to sort of announce there's going to be a Christmas special in a year, or is that a case of like at that point that was all in the plans, and then maybe the shooting thing was a lot quicker, him moving out than they realised, and so that plan was already embedded. But after shooting gone, you've now got a massive issue. So maybe again, maybe you can see little threads of truth in this, because at this point, in the space of a year where they don't have a global distributor anymore, they don't have a lead cast member. They don't really probably have a plan because they'll be aware that there's going to have to be rethinks about how Doctor Who works since it hasn't worked quite as they wanted with Disney. And you've got a year to do that. In the meantime, Bad Wolf is doing several other projects which are on the go, which are quite high flyers. BBC's trying to work out what it's going to do. I can see how, if anyone's worked for any institutions or companies, how when lots of other things going on, stuff starts to get pushed onto the back burner until it's too late, and then they got to go, well, what do we do now? So maybe something like that.
Well, there was the war between the land and the sea, which maybe we'd rather forget. I'm not sure.
But that was already in the process
That was already,
before.
yeah. So, I mean, that's taken up a bit of the time, like the promotion of that, etc. I mean, I know there's a lot of things go on behind the scenes, and we're never going to know really what happened here. But it just feels like they've left it to the very last moment to let us know about this. And let's not forget that Doctor Who was technically out to tender throughout the 1990s and the late 80s as well. Technically, while it was still on TV, there was still some of those coast to coast, Lumiere, whatever. Those production companies were in discussions with the BBC about making a movie. And I mean, up with the 1990s when there was no Doctor Who on TV, and I do think that something like this, with a process like this, we were, between the last episode of Doctor Who and what we thought was going to be the next episode of Doctor Who was going to be 18 months. Now we're looking at least 18 months from this point onwards, I think. And we're looking at, I mean, and that's optimistic. So unless they've already got someone lined up, and they probably haven't, unless it's BBC Studios, because there's a legal tender process has been initiated now. This is going to roll on. We are at least going to have something completely new to talk about in relation to Doctor Who, which is what production company is going to partner with the BBC to produce Doctor Who for the BBC, which is something we've never really spoken about before. It has been done kind of informally and semi-internally with the BBC and the various people, like with Bad Wolf and the apparently we are under the impression that there was assistance from Stephen Moffat's production company, or Stephen Moffat's wife's production company, with some of the Moffat era Doctor Who as well. But this is new territory that we're heading into, isn't it? So that's interesting from that point of view.
But is it territory that it was always going to end up going into in this sort of market?
Probably inevitably, yeah, at some point.
It's just weird that you'd have thought if that was the case. I think the thing that surprises me a little bit about this, and again, we don't know the situation behind the scenes. We don't know what the issue is. You'd think in a perfect world, Bad Wolf would want to step away either at the end of shooting season and announce that they were finishing, or after the Christmas special and you announce you're finishing.
Yes.
You'd want to have something nice and tidy. So I don't think it suits. It doesn't feel like it's acrimonious to anyone where it is at the moment. I'm not interested in what the fans are crying about this. I don't think that's really important. It's just business. It's the way things go. It's frustrating. I do respect that, but how dare they do this to the fans? It's a commercial product. It's not about that per se, but it's not good for them, the BBC or Bad Wolf.
No.
I mean, if I was Bad Wolf, it could be that Doctor Who's just is a complicated beast. You've now got yourself established. You've got outputs going in different directions. You've got your studio set. You can use for other things which are probably in some ways less complicated, both in terms of production, but in terms of the politics, in terms of global markets. I could see why, not that I'm saying they threw Doctor Who away, but I can see why for Bad Wolf, while this moment is a bit icky, it's not it's not going to destroy them. They're now well established and doing stuff. BBC, it's not going to destroy them. It's not going to destroy Doctor Who, but it's just a bit, as you say, it's just a bit messy and feels. Well, this goes back to what I mean. It just feels like exactly where we are at the moment in these media industries, where everyone is just not sure where everything's going and things are just not going the way that they should.
Mm.
And I think part of that is that, like with Doctor Who, for instance, no one really knows what that's meant to be. I don't believe that we've got people not wanting to take hold of it. I'm sure there's many production companies who would take the risk, many actors who would take the risk, but finding the right company and the right actor who can work on a show at the right cost, distributed in the right way to the right audiences who are wanting it at the right time, which, as you say, would probably be 18 months from now. What's the market's going to look like
Yeah,
then?
yeah. I
Um,
saw I saw a post someone had made on the social medias in which they basically compared this with Kevin Feige saying that um, Doomsday doesn't really exist. And I thought to myself, well, no, it's not quite the same as that. But what it is similar to, I think, is probably that post-Infinity Wars period where there's no Avengers movies anymore. And then everything kind of, rather than everything going into TV, and there like been this load of movies everywhere, we're stuck in this period where more aligns with that period where actually Marvel, the MCU decided actually we need to pull this back and just stop and recalibrate. And maybe that's what this moment actually is closer
Interesting.
to.
I don't know. It almost feels like a 1989 moment to me.
Well, I mean, there is that as well. I didn't want to let that bunny out of the hat at this point. But yeah, I mean, there is that. I mean, I did say, it was out to tender for most of the 1990s and the late 80s. But I mean, it does feel like that. But the difference being, I think, is, actually, this goes back to what Rob Sherman said, I think, and then he was roundly dismissed by Bad Wolf for saying so, which is that with the Seventh Doctor and Ace wandering off into the distance, you at least had a Doctor, and you knew who the Doctor was, so that worked for the New Adventures. Whereas with this, with the Billy Piper thing, there's nothing for a spin-off media to hang on to, rather than to try and slip their stories into gaps that have
But
already
is
happened.
but is Doctor Who something which needs that?
Well, I don't
Or
know. I mean, in those days, it probably did. These days, with this notion of all these other doctors and stuff, probably not so much. No.
I'm just thinking of like, I mean, okay, let's go back to traditional stuff. Look at Red Dwarf and some of its reconciliations to previous seasons. The infamous end of series 8 and the no series 9 joke that we don't know how that out, and they just kind of started onwards. To some degree, Rose does that a bit. While there's no cliffhangers for it, it doesn't acknowledge anything in the past. It just moves forward, and almost to the point where some fans were going, "Is this a new continuity?"
Mm.
And we're looking at. I think there was a bit in End of the World where they take a reading of the Doctor, and they've got like different strands suggesting different regenerations, and that was like people's like, "Oh my God, it is proof that this is actually meant to be a continuation of the show." Um, but you're right. I think it's. I mean, it's fascinating. Maybe it is in some ways needed. I mean, fans have been saying it's needed for years, so maybe now they can be happy they've got what they wanted and have a break. And we had it and funny enough, in a weird way, 89, its break was because television was changing and it just didn't fit with, or seemingly didn't fit with who it was aimed at anymore. I remember, we've said this before, I remember being a young boy watching Survival and still loving McCoy and loving the era, but cringing a little at the animatronic cat and the glovey panto cat people, because it felt like it was aimed at. It felt a bit like a CBBC production in terms of its qualities. So by 89, you could feel that it didn't quite have its audience. We look back at it now, and I love that era.
Yeah.
But at the time, even that the young people were kind of feeling like, is this for me anymore?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, there was,
so
I
are we
mean,
at that sort of space?
yeah, well, I mean, we often talk about how we've got all these millions of channels these days and different ways to consume media, etc. And we all talk about that. But then it had kind of had the same, not the same, but it had a fracturing of audience because, there's an extra channel. There
Yeah.
was more, there's more TV shows that people were interested in. TV companies, networks started scheduling TV shows in a particular way. So you ended up with Doctor Who itself moving from the Saturday night to like the two, was it Tuesday and Wednesday or Monday and Tuesday with Peter Davison?
I think it was Monday and Wednesday, my brain says, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I won't quote you on that. And then later on, it went back to Saturday. It really didn't know where it was, and the BBC, in many ways, didn't really know what to do with it, or in some ways, what it even was at that point. So there are similarities. It's not completely exactly the same by any means,
No,
but
of course
there
not.
are there are similarities, and also,
But
of
I
course,
think,
we can blame the Rani as well, perhaps.
but that yeah, I think where you look for the similarities, if we're looking for like by like, we're not going to find it. But if we're looking at a sense of BBC television going through, or television going through a transition, and Doctor Who being a show which had been continually made for a certain audience, which perhaps didn't exist in the same way. I think those are the markers that we've got now.
Mm.
That, as we've said before, Ncuti's Doctor, you can see that Davis was aiming for a younger audience, hoping the Disney platform would capture a global young audience to keep the show moving forward. It didn't quite manage that for various reasons, and has left it feeling like adrift, as if like, who is its audience? And I think that's where they were in '89, which is kind of the reason. Also, we obviously know there's internal political things with the BBC at the time. So as I say, it's not straight like for like, but it just leads to this moment of like when something's not quite working. There are so many shows on television as well. You can suddenly see why you stop it. If it's one of your um, if it's one of your leading I'm going to say icons of your show. I can't think of the word IPs, shall we say, of your brand of the BBC. There's also going to be a point where you're perhaps going to want to stop it if you're not feeling it's in a great space to rethink that, because you don't want that to become to devalue your brand if it's meant to be there to up your brand. So in a sense, maybe it's the right thing to do. And as we've said for the last year, we don't know what the answer is. I don't think that's, I think that's the problem. We can't really say what the answer is.
Yeah.
There's going to have to be a change to television in the near future. There's surely a point where this bubble is just going to pop, and how that's going to pop. And we've seen sort of indications of things like in cinema with back rooms, and we're getting quite a lot of low budget stuff making money. And I know I've said this before. I'm very much surprised that Hollywood has not watched Bargain Hunt and worked out the Bargain Hunt formula. Because the Bargain Hunt formula was, as a contestant, if you've seen Bargain Hunt, if you're not in the UK, then this probably will mean nothing to you. If you're in the UK, and yeah, anyway, Bargain Hunt, the bargain logic was is that you go to a boot sale where there's lots of old stuff, you buy a few things, it goes to auction, and you see if you make a profit. Initially, the idea was that you go and buy something which was like £80, it looked quite good, you go to auction, and it wouldn't make much money because invariably, if it's the wrong way around in a weird way. And then contestant starts to work out, but if I don't buy the £80 thing, if I buy this small pen for £1.50 and it makes £3 at the auction, I've not lost I lost sort of £60 on something that I bought for £80 that went for 20. So let's just have a load of very small things and make a marginal profit and therefore be in profit. And you think, well, surely that's where Hollywood is right now. Instead of spending ending up having to spend 200 million on marketing on films that are costing over 150 million, you make make it smaller, and hopefully you don't lose as much money. You might not have the actual hope that you're going to make bucket loads. But I mean, as we've said before, Joker and Joker 2 is a good example. Joker made for 60 million, a smaller advertising budget as well. Joker 2 made for over 100, larger advertising budget fell through the floor. And I think that's the same with, as we've said, with things like Doctor Who. That's to me where the future is, which it was where it was in the 89s. People were saying, we don't have to have something big. We can have it a bit like these low-key Doctor Who associated things like Probe and,
Yeah. And
downtime
then the X-Files came along with a
and the
relatively
X-Files.
low budget.
Absolutely, and showed that, and a lot of people, well, that's what Doctor Who should be like. And then
Yep.
McGann's film came along, was like, well, that's not far off from
No.
where
Yeah.
the X-Files was.
Yep.
That's the way to do it. And I think that's what Doctor Who's got to do. If there's uncertainty into the audience, you scale it back until you find the audience. But at the moment, if you just keep trying to make it big and big and bigger and crazier and zanier and trying to compete with all these massive shows on Disney, but you don't have that natural market. Ooh,
Okay. Yeah.
what a
So
mess.
we're really interested to know what you think about this. So do let us know. Comments wherever you're finding this podcast. We've got commenting on Patreon. The podcast goes out free on Patreon, but you can join the Patreon and subscribe for the Castorbis archive and the interviews that Brian's doing on there and all the other stuff from the old Castorbis. We'll be on Substack and Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Before we go, though, this is a funny little bit of bookending in some ways. We talk about the Rose Tyler bookending, the Billy Piper bookending.
You mean the season 1 to the final season
from
being both
2005
about Rose?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I live in Teesside, and the voice of the BBC's Tees trailers is Mark Benton, who played Clive, the Doctor Who fan, in Rose. And as I was driving the twins home from school, he came on the radio doing one of his little BBC local radio links, and I was thinking, well, that is a strange piece of bookending of things, isn't it? Purely coincidental, obviously. I'm not, there's no puppetry going on here or anything like that. But it is a funny thing that it should be on this day of all. I should have BBC Tees on rather than Spotify, and hear Mark Benton's voice whilst obviously having Rose, the episode Rose, in my head with today's events. Strange. So yeah, let us know, and we'll be back with a podcast on Friday. It'll be myself, James, and Brian Terranova, and then James and I will try and talk about Mind Warp soon as well. Until next time, let us know what you think, and goodbye.